Chapter 1. The Salary Trap. People are exhausted not because they work too little, but because they work in circles. Every morning begins the same way. An alarm, a screen, a rush, a silent negotiation with your own mind. 5 more minutes, one more scroll, one more coffee, one more promise that someday life will feel lighter than this. But someday keeps moving. And that is how millions of people spend decades trapped inside a cycle they were taught to call stability. Wake up, work, recover, repeat, month after month, year after year, until one day they look in the mirror and realize something terrifying. They built a schedule, but never built freedom. Welcome to this audiobook, Income That Never Stops. In this journey, you are going to discover a simple shift that changes everything about money, work, time, and personal power. Not a fantasy, not fake luxury, not overnight success. This is about building income that continues moving even when you stop moving for a moment. Income tied to systems instead of exhaustion. Income connected to assets instead of attendance. Because the truth is simple. A salary can pay your bills, but systems can buy your life back. And that sentence alone has changed more futures than motivation ever could. Over the next chapters, you will learn why most people remain financially anxious no matter how hard they work. Why modern distractions are quietly stealing your ability to create wealth. Why the richest people obsess over ownership instead of effort, and how ordinary people in ordinary apartments, small towns, crowded cities, and uncertain economies are slowly building streams of income that continue flowing long after the work is done. You will learn how to think like a builder instead of a survivor, and most importantly, you will begin seeing time differently, because once you understand the real value of an hour, your entire life changes. This audiobook is educational and motivational in nature. It is not financial advice. It is a wake-up call, a reminder that your future deserves more than survival mode. So settle in, relax your shoulders, breathe deeper, because what you are about to hear may challenge everything you were taught about success. And somewhere during this journey, maybe tonight, maybe one chapter from now, something inside you is going to shift. The first lie most people are taught about money is this: if you work hard enough, eventually you will be free. Sounds noble, doesn't it? But look around. There are people working 12-hour shifts who still panic when their phone rings unexpectedly because they fear it might be another bill. There are parents missing time with their children while chasing overtime that disappears into groceries, rent, taxes, and debt. There are people with degrees, experience, intelligence, and discipline still trapped in financial anxiety because effort alone was never the full equation. Hard work matters. But hard work without leverage becomes a treadmill, and treadmills are dangerous because they create the illusion of movement while keeping you in the exact same place. The modern world rewards systems more than strain. Think about it carefully. A musician records one song once, and it streams millions of times. A teacher uploads one course, and thousands of students buy it while she sleeps. A software developer builds one useful tool, and subscriptions renew every month. A small investor buys one digital asset, and it compounds quietly for years. The work happened once, but the reward continues. That changes everything. Most people only know linear income, time in, money out. But wealthy people become obsessed with non-linear income. Create once, earn repeatedly. And this is not reserved for celebrities or billionaires anymore. We are living in a strange moment in human history where one focused person with a laptop, discipline, patience, and clarity can build something that reaches the entire world. Yet most people never try. Why? Because they are exhausted. Exhausted people do not think long-term. Exhausted people chase relief. Exhausted people become emotionally attached to certainty, even when certainty is slowly destroying them. That is the hidden tragedy of modern life. People stay loyal to systems that are draining them because uncertainty feels scarier than unhappiness. But there comes a moment, a quiet moment, when your soul starts asking bigger questions. What if I cannot do this for another 20 years? What if my job disappears? What if inflation keeps rising faster than my paycheck? What if my body burns out before my dreams arrive? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they are powerful, because discomfort is often the beginning of awareness, and awareness changes people. There is a reason so many individuals are waking up right now across the world, in apartments in Brazil, in crowded trains in Tokyo, in cafes in Nigeria, in small bedrooms in Canada, lit only by laptop screens at midnight, in tiny rented spaces in India where young creators edit videos after work, hoping to escape the cycle. People are beginning to realize that surviving is not the same as living. And once you realize that, you can never fully unsee it. The problem is not that people are lazy. Most people are overwhelmed. They wake up overstimulated. Notifications before sunrise, news before breakfast, stress before focus. They spend their best mental energy solving problems for companies they do not own, then come home too mentally exhausted to build something for themselves. That is not weakness. That is design. Attention has become the most expensive currency on earth, and every app, every algorithm, every distraction is competing to keep you reactive instead of reflective. Because reflective people build, reactive people consume. One creates assets. The other creates profit for someone else. Read that again in your mind. Reflective people build, reactive people consume. This is why silence matters. This is why focus matters. This is why 1 hour a day can completely redirect a human life. Because income that never stops is rarely built in dramatic moments. It is built quietly, an hour before work, 90 minutes after dinner, weekends when nobody is clapping, early mornings while the city still sleeps. The future changes in silence long before it becomes visible. And that is difficult for modern people to accept, because social media trained everyone to crave immediate evidence. But real wealth often looks boring at first. One article written, one product improved, one skill practiced, one investment repeated, one audience member helped, one system refined, drops carved stone, and eventually the person who looked behind suddenly becomes unstoppable. Not because they got lucky, because they stayed consistent long enough for compounding to appear. Compounding is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. People think compounding only applies to money. It does not. Your habits compound. Your focus compounds. Your discipline compounds. Your distractions compound. Your excuses compound too. Every day you repeat something, you strengthen it, including the life that is making you unhappy. That is why this audiobook is not just about income, it is about identity. Because the moment you stop seeing yourself as only a worker, you begin behaving differently. You stop asking, how can I make more money this month? And start asking, what can I build that continues creating value long after today? That question creates a different future, a calmer future, a future where your income is no longer chained entirely to your physical presence. And listen carefully. This does not mean quitting your job tomorrow. Some people hear conversations about freedom and immediately become reckless. That is not wisdom. The goal is not chaos. The goal is leverage. Build while you work, learn while you earn, create before you escape. That is how intelligent transitions happen. Quietly, strategically, patiently. The strongest trees do not grow overnight, and neither do strong lives. If this message resonates with you already, take a moment later to write down one sentence from this audiobook that hit you hardest. Not for me, for you, because clarity grows when thoughts become visible. Now here is the deeper truth most people never hear. A salary conditions your psychology. It trains you to think in fixed intervals, weekly, monthly, hourly. But builders think differently. They think in systems, assets, audience, ownership, scale, compounding. A worker asks, how many hours will this take? A builder asks, can this continue working after the hours are finished? That single shift can transform an entire bloodline. Because once one person in a family learns how to build systems instead of surviving paycheck to paycheck, the emotional atmosphere changes, stress changes, conversations change, confidence changes, children notice, relationships improve, hope returns, and hope is powerful. A hopeless person procrastinates, a hopeful person prepares. That is why this journey matters, not because money solves every problem, but because constant financial pressure quietly damages human potential. It steals presence, creativity, patience, health. And somewhere deep down, you already know that. You can feel it, that tightness in your chest when unexpected expenses appear, that fear when work becomes unstable, that exhaustion from trading all your energy just to stay afloat. This audiobook is about escaping that emotional prison one decision at a time, not instantly, but intentionally, because freedom is rarely one giant leap. Usually, it is 1,000 invisible choices repeated consistently until one day your old life no longer fits who you became. And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about the most dangerous addiction in modern society. Not drugs, not alcohol. Predictability. The addiction that keeps millions trapped in lives they secretly want to escape. And once you understand it, you will never look at comfort the same way again. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Addiction to Predictability. Most people do not fear failure nearly as much as they fear uncertainty. Think about that carefully. A person will stay in a draining job for 10 years because the paycheck arrives on the same date every month. They will tolerate exhaustion, disrespect, anxiety, even quiet misery, as long as the routine feels familiar. Predictability becomes emotional medication, not because it creates happiness, because it temporarily reduces fear, and that is one of the most dangerous traps a human being can fall into. Because comfort has a strange way of disguising decay. A plant can die slowly while still looking green for a while. A relationship can collapse emotionally before it collapses physically. And a person can lose their dreams years before they lose their job. That is what happens when survival becomes the entire purpose of life. People stop imagining, stop building, stop risking, stop creating. They begin protecting routines that are quietly shrinking their spirit. This is why so many people feel strangely tired even after resting. It is not always physical exhaustion. Sometimes it is emotional stagnation. The soul knows when it is meant for growth, and deep down, many people already know they were built for more than repeating the same anxious month forever. But the mind says something dangerous. At least this feels safe. Safe. That word controls entire lives. Safe jobs, safe conversations, safe dreams, small enough to avoid embarrassment. But safety without growth eventually becomes another form of suffering. And here is the painful irony. The world is changing whether you participate or not. Technology is changing. Industries are changing. Artificial intelligence is changing the value of skills. Attention is changing. Business is changing. Communication is changing. The people who adapt slowly disappear behind the people who learn continuously. That is the reality of 2025. The old promise was simple: go to school, get a stable job, stay loyal, retire safely. But millions are discovering that stability itself has become unstable. Companies restructure overnight. Entire professions evolve in months. Inflation quietly erodes salaries while people continue running faster just to stay in the same place. And this creates a silent emotional crisis, because many people were never taught how to build leverage, only obedience. They were trained to become reliable workers, not strategic creators. Yet inside every human being is the ability to build something valuable: a skill, a service, a platform, a system, a brand, an investment habit, a body of knowledge, an audience, a digital asset, a solution to a problem people repeatedly face. The internet changed the rules, but most people still live psychologically inside the old economy. That is why they remain trapped. Not because opportunity disappeared, because belief disappeared. Many people secretly believe wealth belongs to other people. People born luckier, smarter, connected, more charismatic. But look closely at the modern world. Some of the most successful creators today started with nothing but consistency and a smartphone. A woman in a tiny apartment teaching language lessons online. A former delivery driver building a niche newsletter. A quiet designer creating templates sold thousands of times digitally. A teacher recording lessons once and generating income repeatedly. A programmer solving one painful business problem and turning it into recurring subscriptions. The game has changed, but exhausted minds struggle to see new possibilities. That is why the first investment is never money. It is awareness. Because you cannot build a different future while thinking exactly like the version of you trapped in survival mode. And survival mode changes how humans think. When people are constantly stressed, they focus only on immediate relief. Cheap dopamine, cheap distractions, cheap escapes. Scroll, watch, consume, repeat. Hours disappear silently. And then people say something heartbreaking: I just don't have time. But often the issue is not missing time, it is missing direction. Direction organizes energy. Without direction, attention leaks everywhere. That is why builders protect focus like their future depends on it. Because it does. An hour of focused creation every day can become a completely different life within a few years. But most people underestimate small actions because they are addicted to dramatic results. They want visible transformation immediately, yet nearly everything meaningful grows invisibly first. Muscle grows slowly. Trust grows slowly. Skills grow slowly. Audiences grow slowly. Assets grow slowly. Nature itself teaches this lesson constantly. The strongest oak tree begins as something fragile enough to crush beneath the shoe. But consistency creates power, and here is where people lose patience. The beginning feels unfair. You work on something nobody notices. You improve skills nobody praises. You create content nobody watches. You save tiny amounts that seem insignificant, and the ego becomes frustrated. Why isn't this working yet? Because compounding is quiet before it becomes obvious. The first phase of building income that never stops is almost invisible. And that is why most people quit. They need applause too early. But builders learn to continue without validation. That is one of the most powerful psychological shifts a person can make. Imagine someone learning video editing after work every night for a year while nobody cares. Imagine someone studying marketing while friends laugh at their little side project. Imagine someone waking up at 5 a.m. writing articles nobody reads yet. That looks foolish to people addicted to immediate rewards. Until one day, the systems start moving, the audience grows, the skill sharpens, the opportunities multiply, the income diversifies, and suddenly outsiders call it luck. But it was never luck. It was invisible consistency. The world often only notices the harvest. It ignores the seasons of planting. That is why emotional control matters so much. Because there will be long stretches where your future still looks small externally. And during those moments, your mindset becomes everything. You must learn how to continue building before evidence appears. That is maturity. Children need immediate rewards. Adults understand delayed rewards create larger freedom. And freedom, real freedom, is not waking up on a beach, drinking expensive coffee, pretending life has no problems. Freedom is calmer than that. Freedom is being able to breathe when unexpected expenses appear. Freedom is choosing work instead of begging for it. Freedom is having options. Freedom is buying time back. Freedom is not panicking every Sunday night before Monday morning. That kind of freedom changes your nervous system. You speak differently, walk differently, think differently, because fear no longer controls every decision. Now listen carefully. This audiobook is not telling you to hate your job. Some jobs are meaningful. Some careers help people deeply. Some professions create purpose and dignity. The issue is dependence. If one source disappearing destroys your entire life, that is vulnerability. And the modern world punishes vulnerability faster than ever. That is why multiple streams of value matter, not just multiple streams of income. Value, because income follows value repeatedly delivered. A person who learns how to solve problems consistently becomes difficult to ignore economically. And solving problems is no longer limited by geography. A designer in Kenya can work with clients in London. A creator in Ukraine can teach students in California. A writer in Argentina can build readers across the globe. A teenager with editing skills can out-earn experienced professionals trapped in outdated systems. The barriers changed, but many minds did not. That is why your greatest prison may not be financial. It may be psychological. You may still believe your life is smaller than it actually is. And if there is one thing you should remember from this chapter, remember this. The world rewards people who create more than people who merely comply. Creation is leverage. Creation scales. Creation compounds. That does not mean everyone becomes famous. Fame is irrelevant. Impact matters more. One useful digital product helping 1,000 people can change a family's future. One valuable skill can create opportunities for decades. One audience built honestly can become an asset that keeps producing value. But none of it happens accidentally. And this is where most people sabotage themselves. They wait for confidence before starting. But confidence rarely comes first. Action creates confidence. Movement creates clarity. The first video may be awkward. The first product may be imperfect. The first investment may feel small. The first attempt may fail completely. That is normal. Every builder begins as a beginner. The difference is simple. Some people stop. Others continue long enough to transform. And transformation is not dramatic most days. Usually it looks repetitive. Study, practice, refine, repeat. There is a quote worth remembering. Your future is hiding inside your daily routine. Not your intentions, not your fantasies, your routines. Because routines become systems, and systems shape destiny. That is why people who build income that never stops become deeply intentional with their habits. They guard mornings, protect focus, limit distractions, invest in learning, create before consuming, because they understand something most people ignore. Attention is either building your future or building someone else's. That sentence alone can wake a person up. Ask yourself honestly, how many hours have disappeared into consumption this month? Scrolling through lives you do not want while neglecting the one life you actually own. That realization hurts. But pain can become fuel if you stop avoiding it. And the next chapter is where things become deeply practical, because we are going to talk about the hidden difference between workers and owners. A difference so small psychologically that most people never notice it, yet powerful enough to separate financial stress from financial freedom. And once you understand it, you will never look at time the same way again. Chapter 3. Workers think in hours. Owners think in systems. There is a sentence that quietly controls the lives of millions of people. How much does it pay per hour? At first, that question sounds responsible, logical, practical, adult. But hidden inside that question is an entire philosophy about life. A philosophy that trains people to exchange time directly for survival. And once a person becomes trapped inside that pattern for too long, they stop seeing possibilities beyond it. They begin measuring their entire existence through effort instead of leverage. Hours worked, days worked, years worked. But owners think differently. Owners ask another question entirely. How many times can this continue creating value after I build it? That is the shift. That is the doorway. That is where the entire future begins changing, because when you understand systems, you stop trying to become endlessly productive and start trying to become strategically effective. There is a massive difference. A worker wakes up asking, "What must I do today?" A builder asks, "What can I create today that keeps working tomorrow?" One survives repeatedly. The other compounds repeatedly. And this distinction matters more now than at any other point in history, because technology has created a world where systems scale faster than ever before. One piece of useful content can reach millions. One online course can sell for years. One software solution can serve thousands simultaneously. One investment strategy, repeated consistently, can create momentum that eventually feels almost magical. But systems are invisible at first. That is why average minds dismiss them. The world praises visible labor because visible labor is easy to understand. People see someone working 12 exhausting hours and immediately respect the effort. But someone spending 2 quiet hours building a digital system from a laptop, most people underestimate it completely until the results become undeniable. That is one of the strangest truths about success. The beginning often looks unimpressive. A nearly empty channel, a tiny audience, a simple website, a rough first product, an awkward first attempt. The early stage of almost every successful system looks ordinary. That is why patience becomes a superpower. Modern culture destroyed patience. Everything became instant. Instant entertainment, instant food, instant delivery, instant opinions, instant dopamine. People now expect transformation at the speed of scrolling. But meaningful wealth still grows slowly, just like strength, just like wisdom, just like trust. The universe does not reward desperation. It rewards consistency. And consistency is difficult because humans are emotional creatures. Some mornings you feel powerful. Other mornings you feel uncertain. Some days you believe in your future completely. Other days doubt creeps in quietly. That is normal. The goal is not emotional perfection. The goal is system stability, because systems protect you from emotional inconsistency. Think about the healthiest people you know. Most are not healthy because they suddenly became motivated one Tuesday morning. They built systems, regular meals, movement routines, sleep habits, boundaries. The same applies to income. Financial stability grows from repeated intelligent behavior, not emotional bursts. And this is where people misunderstand freedom completely. Freedom is not built through intensity alone. It is built through repeatability. Can you repeat your process even when life feels heavy? That is the real question, because anybody can feel inspired temporarily. But systems continue functioning when emotions fluctuate. And emotions always fluctuate. There will be seasons where you feel behind. Seasons where results are slow. Seasons where other people appear to be winning faster. Comparison destroys more futures than failure, especially now. Social media created a world where people compare their private beginnings to other people's public highlights. A dangerous game, because what you see online is rarely the full story. You see the success, not the years of obscurity, not the loneliness, not the failed versions, not the fear, not the discipline required to continue before momentum arrived. And momentum changes everything. At first, progress feels microscopic. Then suddenly, it feels exponential. That is the nature of compounding. Most people quit during the invisible phase. Imagine planting seeds and digging them up every week to check if roots are growing. That is how impatient people destroy their future. They interrupt their own momentum constantly. New idea every month, new goal every week, new distraction every day. But wealth favors depth more than novelty. The people who eventually build income that never stops are usually not the loudest people in the room. Often, they are the most consistent, quietly improving, quietly learning, quietly refining systems while others chase attention. Attention is addictive, but assets are transformative. And there is another dangerous misconception people carry. They believe systems remove humanity. They think systems sound cold, mechanical. But the opposite is true. Good systems create more humanity in your life because they reduce chaos. Imagine waking up without immediate financial panic. Imagine choosing projects instead of accepting anything out of fear. Imagine having enough breathing room to think creatively again. That changes relationships. Stress changes how humans love. Financial pressure creates tension. People rarely talk about honestly. It shortens patience, reduces presence, creates arguments, creates emotional fatigue. People become physically present but mentally absent because survival consumes all available attention. This is why building leverage matters beyond money. It restores emotional space, and emotional space is where life actually happens. A parent fully listening to their child, a couple having dinner without financial panic hanging silently over the table, a person sleeping deeply instead of calculating bills at midnight. That is wealth too, not flashy wealth, real wealth. Now listen carefully. You do not need millions to begin escaping survival mode. You need systems that gradually reduce dependence. That is a different path entirely. And the beautiful thing about systems is that small beginnings still matter enormously. A tiny investment repeated monthly matters. A small audience built honestly matters. A useful skill improved daily matters. A side income stream earning modestly still matters. Because every stream creates optionality. And optionality creates power. The power to say no. The power to pause. The power to leave toxic environments. The power to choose differently. Most people underestimate how psychologically powerful options are. When people feel trapped, they tolerate things they should never tolerate. But systems slowly remove desperation, and desperation clouds judgment. That is why calm people make better long-term decisions. Now let us talk about one of the greatest misunderstandings about passive income. Passive income is not passive in the beginning. That phrase confuses people. They imagine effortless money appearing magically. No. Most systems require intense effort up front. The difference is this. Workers repeat effort endlessly. Builders front-load effort strategically. A creator may work hundreds of hours building something valuable initially, but eventually that asset continues generating value repeatedly. That changes the relationship between time and money completely. Think about books. A writer spends years crafting one meaningful book, but decades later, the words still create value. That is leverage. A video recorded once can educate millions later. A software tool built once can solve endless recurring problems. An investment purchased today may grow for years, silently. The effort separates from the reward. And once you experience even a small version of that shift, your brain changes permanently. You begin looking at every skill differently, every hour differently, every opportunity differently. You stop asking only what pays today and start asking what keeps paying tomorrow. That question can reshape an entire future. But here is where discipline enters the story, because systems require delayed gratification. And delayed gratification feels painful initially. You may need to study while others relax, build while others consume, practice while others scroll, save while others overspend. That can feel lonely, especially in a culture addicted to immediate pleasure. But remember something important. Temporary discomfort often creates permanent advantages, while temporary comfort often creates permanent limitations. The world rarely says that out loud anymore. Modern culture markets comfort constantly. Relax more, escape more, consume more. But very few voices teach people how to build, and building changes human beings. Builders become more intentional. They think longer term. They become emotionally stronger. They stop needing constant entertainment because purpose itself becomes energizing. Purpose creates energy that distraction can never provide. That is why many people feel strangely empty after endless consumption. Consumption fills time. Creation fills identity. One drains you slowly. The other expands you slowly. And if you are listening carefully right now, maybe you are beginning to feel that shift already. Maybe part of you is realizing this audiobook is not really about money. Not entirely. It is about reclaiming authorship over your own life. Because a person entirely dependent on external structures for survival slowly loses creative courage. But a person building systems begins recovering agency. They begin remembering something powerful. I can create value too. That sentence matters, especially in a world designed to make people feel replaceable. You are more powerful than your routine has convinced you. But potential means nothing without action. That is why the next chapter may challenge you deeply, because we are going to talk about the invisible habits silently keeping people poor. Habits so normalized that most individuals never even question them. And once you see them clearly, you will understand why some people stay trapped no matter how much they earn. Hey there, we want to remind you that we often choose topics suggested by you, our viewers, in the comments. In the comments, you can suggest a topic or ask a question about what you'd like to see in our video. We read every comment carefully, so we promise not to miss a single one. Thank you. Let's keep going. Chapter 4. The Invisible Habits Keeping You Financially Stuck. Most people think poverty begins in a bank account. It does not. Poverty often begins in patterns, invisible patterns, repeated patterns, emotionally comfortable patterns. Because before a person struggles financially on the outside, they usually struggle strategically on the inside. And the dangerous part is this: bad habits rarely feel destructive in the moment. That is why they survive for years unnoticed. Scrolling for 3 hours does not feel life-changing. Ordering unnecessary things online does not feel catastrophic. Avoiding learning because you are tired does not feel dangerous. But repeated daily, those behaviors quietly shape destiny. A single drop of water seems harmless, but drops repeated over years carve stone. So do habits. The modern world profits from distracted people. Distracted people consume more. Reactive people buy emotionally. Unfocused people stay dependent. That is why protecting your attention has become one of the highest forms of self-respect in modern life. And yet, most people wake up and immediately surrender their minds to noise. Notifications before thoughts. Opinions before clarity. Entertainment before intention. Then they wonder why they feel mentally scattered all day. Your mind cannot build wealth while constantly interrupted. Deep work creates leverage. Shallow distraction creates exhaustion. That is one of the defining truths of this era. There are people physically working less than previous generations, yet feeling mentally more drained than ever before. Why? Because attention fragmentation exhausts the nervous system. Humans were not designed to consume thousands of emotional signals daily. Bad news, short videos, arguments, advertisements, comparison, artificial urgency. People carry invisible mental clutter everywhere now, and cluttered minds struggle to create clear futures. This is why intentional silence matters. Not because silence is trendy, because silence restores strategic thinking. A distracted person reacts. A focused person builds. There is a reason high performers across industries protect mornings aggressively. Writers, athletes, entrepreneurs, investors, creators. Many of them understand the same principle. Your first hours shape your identity. If you begin every day consuming, your brain remains passive. But when you begin creating, reflecting, planning, or learning, your psychology changes. You feel agency, and agency is powerful. People trapped in survival mode often feel powerless. That feeling becomes dangerous over time because eventually they stop trying. They stop imagining alternatives. They begin saying phrases like, "This is just life. Not everyone gets to succeed. At least I'm getting by." Those phrases sound harmless, but repeated long enough, they become identity, and identity drives behavior. If someone believes they are permanently stuck, they stop taking strategic risks. They stop investing in themselves, stop learning, stop creating. Their future shrinks quietly. That is why mindset matters so much financially. Not because positive thinking magically creates money, but because beliefs influence behavior and behavior compounds. A person who believes growth is possible behaves differently from someone who believes limitation is permanent. One studies after work. The other escapes after work. One invests gradually. The other spends emotionally. One learns patience. The other chases instant relief. And years later, the gap becomes enormous. Not because of one dramatic decision, because of repeated daily direction. There is another invisible habit destroying people financially: confusing consumption with progress. Modern culture constantly creates the illusion of productivity. Watching motivational clips feels productive. Listening to podcasts endlessly feels productive. Planning constantly feels productive. But information without execution changes nothing. Knowledge becomes power only when behavior changes. That is why some people consume self-improvement content for years while their lives remain identical. They became addicted to inspiration instead of transformation. Transformation requires friction. You must do uncomfortable things repeatedly. Study when tired, practice when embarrassed, save when tempted, focus when distracted. Nobody escapes this process. Every meaningful life is built through repeated discomfort. But discomfort is not punishment. Discomfort is adaptation. The gym hurts before the body strengthens. Discipline hurts before life stabilizes. Learning hurts before opportunities expand. Pain itself is not the enemy. Meaningless pain is. And many people are currently enduring meaningless pain because they refuse short-term discomfort that could create long-term freedom. That sentence matters deeply. People avoid the discomfort of learning new skills, then endure decades of financial anxiety instead. Avoid the discomfort of discipline, then suffer the discomfort of regret. Avoid the discomfort of building, then remain dependent forever. Every path contains discomfort. Choose the discomfort that creates growth. Now let us talk about another invisible trap: lifestyle inflation. One of the fastest ways people remain financially trapped is increasing expenses every time income increases. A raise appears. Immediately, lifestyle expands. Better car, more subscriptions, more status spending, more appearances to maintain. And suddenly, someone earning twice as much still feels financially stressed. Why? Because they upgraded consumption before upgrading systems. That is dangerous. The wealthy often look calm because their assets work harder than their image. Meanwhile, many people look wealthy online while privately drowning in pressure. Never confuse appearance with freedom. True wealth is often quiet. Quiet confidence, quiet ownership, quiet options. Some of the richest people psychologically are not flashy at all. They simply have breathing room, and breathing room changes human behavior. When people are desperate, they rush decisions. When people are calm, they think strategically. That is why emergency savings matter emotionally, not just financially. That is why investments matter emotionally. That is why side income matters emotionally. Because every layer of stability reduces panic, and panic destroys clarity. There is another habit keeping people trapped that almost nobody discusses honestly: constant emotional comparison. Comparison used to happen locally. Now it happens globally every minute. People compare their ordinary Tuesday afternoon to someone else's edited highlight reel from Dubai, Los Angeles, Monaco, or Bali. And comparison creates emotional exhaustion, not inspiration, because comparison shifts focus outward instead of inward. Builders focus inward first. What skills am I developing? What systems am I building? What habits am I repeating? What value am I creating? Those questions create progress. Meanwhile, comparison creates paralysis, and paralysis is expensive. Years disappear while people obsess over other lives instead of improving their own. If this audiobook gives you nothing else, let it give you this realization: your attention is shaping your future every day. What you repeatedly focus on grows stronger. Fear grows stronger. Discipline grows stronger. Confidence grows stronger. Excuses grow stronger too. That means your environment matters deeply. Who are you listening to every day? People addicted to complaining? People who normalize mediocrity? People who mock ambition because they abandoned their own dreams? Be careful. Energy transfers. A hopeless environment slowly weakens vision. That is why builders often spend periods of life misunderstood. Growth requires separation sometimes, not arrogance, alignment. You cannot constantly surround yourself with distraction and expect extraordinary focus. You cannot consume chaos endlessly and expect internal peace. At some point, intentional living becomes necessary. And intentional living looks different than modern culture. It means choosing long-term value over short-term dopamine, reading while others scroll, learning while others gossip, building while others perform. That path can feel lonely initially, but eventually it becomes liberating, because discipline creates self-respect, and self-respect changes everything. The way you speak, the way you negotiate, the way you walk into rooms, the opportunities you believe you deserve. People who trust themselves move differently, and trust is built through kept promises. Every time you say you will do something and follow through, your identity strengthens. Every time you betray your own commitments, your identity weakens. This applies financially too. If you constantly abandon your plans, your confidence disappears. But when you begin keeping small promises consistently, momentum grows. Read 10 pages daily, save a little consistently, practice one skill repeatedly, build one system slowly. Tiny disciplined actions create enormous psychological shifts over time. And psychology shapes destiny more than people realize. Now here is the difficult truth. Most people are not one opportunity away from freedom. They are one identity shift away. Because opportunities already exist around them constantly, but exhausted minds overlook them. Fearful minds avoid them. Distracted minds never notice them. That is why internal transformation matters first. The external world changes after. And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about one of the greatest financial advantages available in modern history: the ability to monetize knowledge. Not celebrity knowledge, not perfect knowledge, useful knowledge, because the internet created a world where what you know can quietly become an asset that pays repeatedly. And once you understand that, you may never look at your own experiences the same way again. Chapter 5. Your knowledge can become an asset. One of the biggest lies people believe is this: I have nothing valuable to offer. That sentence has buried more potential than failure ever has, because most people underestimate what they know simply because it feels normal to them. A mechanic forgets how valuable practical knowledge is because engines became familiar. A teacher forgets how powerful communication skills are because explaining became routine. A fitness coach forgets how rare discipline is because training became identity. A designer forgets how valuable creativity is because design became second nature. Familiarity hides value, and the internet changed everything about how value can be shared. For most of human history, knowledge stayed local. Now, knowledge scales globally. That changes the rules entirely. A single useful insight can travel across continents in seconds. A lesson recorded once can help thousands repeatedly. A process explained clearly can become an income stream for years. And yet most people still believe monetization belongs only to experts. No, perfection is not required. Usefulness is. People are constantly searching for solutions: how to communicate better, how to edit videos, how to stay disciplined, how to learn languages, how to organize finances, how to cook healthier meals, how to build confidence, how to use AI tools, how to recover from burnout, how to market businesses online. Every problem creates demand, and every skill that solves a problem contains economic potential. That realization can change a life, because suddenly your experiences stop looking random. They begin looking valuable. Even your struggles may become useful. Sometimes the thing you survived becomes the thing you eventually teach. That is one of the most beautiful transformations a person can experience: pain becoming purpose. Imagine someone who spent years battling debt learning budgeting deeply enough to eventually teach financial clarity online. Imagine someone who overcame anxiety creating calming systems for overwhelmed people. Imagine someone who learned discipline through difficult years, eventually mentoring others trying to rebuild their lives. The modern world rewards authentic usefulness more than polished perfection. People are exhausted by fake expertise. What they crave now is honesty, real experiences, real lessons, real clarity. That is why ordinary people are building extraordinary opportunities today, not because they are flawless, because they are relatable and useful. And usefulness scales. There are people quietly earning income right now from newsletters with small, loyal audiences, digital templates, educational channels, communities, courses, freelance skills, consulting, licensing designs, writing, audio content, coaching, affiliate systems, micro businesses nobody hears about publicly. The economy has fragmented, and that is good news, because it means there are now countless small doors instead of one giant gatekeeper deciding everything. But fragmented opportunity requires self-direction, and self-direction scares people conditioned to wait for permission. Many individuals secretly want certainty before starting. A guaranteed outcome, guaranteed income, guaranteed success. But builders understand something different. Clarity often appears after movement, not before it. You discover direction through action. The first attempt teaches you. The second improves you. The third sharpens you. Momentum creates understanding. That is why overthinking destroys so many futures. People want to map the entire journey before taking the first step. Meanwhile, someone less talented but more decisive begins moving and eventually overtakes them completely. Action beats perfection repeatedly. Now let us talk honestly about fear. Because fear appears every time someone tries building something meaningful. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of looking foolish, fear of wasting time. But hidden beneath all those fears is another fear people rarely admit. The fear of discovering their potential, because potential creates responsibility. Once you realize you could build a different life, staying passive becomes emotionally painful. You can no longer pretend ignorance. Awareness changes everything. That is why some people avoid growth content entirely. Not because they dislike improvement, because improvement threatens comfortable excuses. If you know more, you must eventually choose differently. And choosing differently is difficult, especially when your environment remains the same. A person trying to build assets while surrounded by chronic negativity faces an invisible battle every day. People may mock your discipline, question your vision, call your efforts unrealistic, not because your dream is impossible, because your growth reminds them of their own abandoned ambitions. Never underestimate how uncomfortable change makes people around you. Your discipline forces others to confront their inconsistency. Your focus exposes their distraction. Your growth highlights their stagnation. That is why building quietly becomes powerful. Not secretively out of fear, strategically out of protection. Early stages are fragile. A small flame grows stronger when protected from strong winds. So does vision. You do not need everyone to understand your direction immediately. You need consistency long enough for results to speak. And results eventually become undeniable. But before results appear externally, identity shifts internally. That is the real beginning. The moment you stop seeing yourself only as a consumer and begin seeing yourself as a creator. Creators think differently. Consumers ask, what can entertain me? Creators ask, what can I build? Consumers wait for opportunities. Creators generate opportunities. Consumers spend energy reacting. Creators spend energy designing. One mindset creates dependence. The other creates leverage. And here is something deeply important. You do not need millions of followers to build meaningful income anymore. That illusion keeps people frozen. A small, loyal audience can change your life completely. 1,000 deeply engaged people supporting valuable work consistently can create stability most people underestimate. Depth matters more than noise. Trust matters more than virality. And trust is built slowly. That word again. Slowly. Everything meaningful seems to return to patience, because patience protects long-term thinking. And long-term thinking is disappearing from modern culture. Everyone wants acceleration, faster success, faster results, faster money. But speed without foundation creates collapse. You can see it everywhere now. People becoming visible before becoming emotionally stable. People earning quickly without learning discipline. People chasing status instead of sustainability. And eventually, pressure exposes weak foundations. That is why building character matters alongside building income. Because money amplifies identity. If someone lacks discipline before income grows, chaos often grows too. Real wealth requires emotional maturity, the ability to delay gratification, manage impulses, think long-term, remain calm during uncertainty. That calmness becomes an advantage itself. Most people panic constantly now. Panic investing, panic spending, panic comparing, panic reacting. Calm builders quietly continue. Study, improve, adjust, repeat, and eventually repetition creates inevitability. Now listen carefully, because this next idea may shift your perspective permanently. Every skill you develop becomes part of your personal economic ecosystem. Communication skills matter. Writing matters, sales matters, leadership matters, emotional intelligence matters. Adaptability matters. These are not soft skills. They are survival skills in a rapidly changing world. People who communicate clearly will always create opportunities. People who solve problems calmly will always remain valuable. People who learn continuously will always stay adaptable. That is why investing in yourself creates the highest long-term returns. Not motivationally, practically. A sharpened mind notices opportunities dull minds miss entirely. And opportunities are everywhere once awareness expands. The internet is not just entertainment, it is infrastructure. Infrastructure for distribution, infrastructure for learning, infrastructure for business, infrastructure for ownership. The same phone distracting millions is quietly building fortunes for focused individuals. That is one of the defining realities of this era. Technology itself is neutral. Discipline determines whether it becomes a weapon or a prison. Now imagine this. Imagine dedicating one focused hour every day for the next 3 years toward building one meaningful skill or system. Not occasionally, consistently. Would your life remain the same? Impossible. 3 years of focused effort compounds dramatically. But most people never experience that transformation because they underestimate consistency. They chase intensity instead. Short bursts, quick excitement, then burnout. Builders avoid emotional extremes. They build rhythms, sustainable rhythms, because sustainable effort beats unsustainable motivation every single time. And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about the emotional side of money itself. Why so many people sabotage financial growth unconsciously. Why guilt, fear, and identity shape income more than most realize. And why learning to receive abundance may be just as important as learning to create it. Chapter 6. The emotional relationship you have with money. Most people do not have a financial problem first. They have an emotional pattern first. And until that pattern changes, income alone rarely creates peace. You can see this everywhere. People earning more than they ever imagined, still anxious, still stressed, still trapped in cycles of emotional spending and silent fear. Because money magnifies whatever already exists internally. If someone feels unworthy, more money often creates more insecurity. If someone lacks discipline, more money creates bigger chaos. If someone seeks validation, more money creates louder performances. That is why some people become financially successful externally, while remaining emotionally exhausted internally. True wealth requires inner stability, and inner stability begins with awareness. Ask yourself honestly, what emotions do you connect to money? Fear, shame, pressure, scarcity, comparison, freedom, possibility? Many people inherited financial beliefs without ever questioning them. Money is hard to make. Rich people are selfish. You should be grateful just to survive. People like us never become wealthy. Those sentences sound small, but repeated for years, they become subconscious instructions. And subconscious beliefs shape behavior quietly. A person who secretly believes wealth is wrong may sabotage opportunities unconsciously. A person who believes success belongs to others may stop trying too early. A person who associates money with stress may avoid financial responsibility entirely. That is why healing your mindset matters practically, not just emotionally. Your internal world shapes your external decisions, and decisions compound. Now listen carefully. There is nothing noble about permanent financial suffering. Struggle is not proof of morality. Exhaustion is not proof of worth. Many people wear burnout like a badge of honor because society romanticized overworking for generations. But constant depletion is not wisdom. It is imbalance, and imbalance eventually breaks people, mentally, emotionally, physically. You were not designed to exist permanently in survival mode. No human nervous system thrives under endless stress. That is why so many people feel numb now. Not because they are weak, because they are overloaded, overstimulated, overworked, overdistracted, underrested, emotionally fragmented. And fragmented people struggle to build clear futures. This is why emotional regulation becomes a financial advantage. Calm people think long-term. Panicked people think short-term. When someone feels emotionally unsafe, they seek immediate comfort. Impulse purchases, doom scrolling, entertainment binges, escapes, temporary relief. But temporary relief often creates permanent stagnation. That is the trap. Now think about this carefully. Why do some people suddenly spend emotionally after stressful days? Because consumption became emotional anesthesia, a reward, a distraction, a momentary escape from pressure. Companies understand this deeply. Modern marketing rarely sells products. It sells emotional states, status, comfort, belonging, escape, validation, and emotionally exhausted people become easy targets. That is why awareness matters so much financially. You must learn to pause before reacting emotionally with money. Not because spending is bad, because unconscious spending keeps people trapped. There is another emotional pattern that silently destroys financial growth. The fear of being seen trying. Many people would rather stay stuck than risk embarrassment. They want certainty before effort, approval before action, confidence before practice. But every skilled person was once inexperienced. Every creator once looked awkward. Every entrepreneur once felt uncertain. Every investor once felt confused. Every speaker once sounded nervous. Growth always begins uncomfortably. Always. That discomfort is not evidence you should stop. It is evidence you are expanding, and expansion changes identity. Think about someone learning a new skill after years of believing they were bad with technology, or not creative, or not business-minded. At first, the process feels emotionally difficult because it challenges self-image. The brain resists unfamiliar identity. That resistance is normal. But if someone continues long enough, identity adapts. I'm learning. I'm improving. I can do difficult things. Those internal shifts become powerful because identity determines consistency, and consistency determines outcomes. This is why self-respect matters financially. People who respect themselves plan differently, save differently, negotiate differently, learn differently. They stop seeing themselves as temporary survivors and begin seeing themselves as long-term builders. That shift changes behavior everywhere. A builder thinks about future consequences, not just present emotions. And this becomes especially important in the age of comparison, because comparison creates invisible emotional pressure constantly. People see luxury online and begin feeling behind financially, even when they are progressing responsibly. That emotional pressure causes reckless decisions, debt for appearances, spending for validation, lifestyle inflation for social approval. But social approval is expensive when built on insecurity. Never build a lifestyle designed to impress people who are not helping build your future. That sentence alone could save someone years of stress. Now, here is something most people never realize. Financial peace often comes from reducing emotional chaos before increasing income. A calmer mind spends differently, plans differently, focuses differently. That is why discipline creates emotional freedom too. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is self-protection. A disciplined person protects future peace. Imagine two people earning the same amount. One spends emotionally every month chasing temporary satisfaction. The other builds systems gradually while controlling impulses. 5 years later, their realities look completely different. Not because one got lucky, because repeated emotional decisions compounded. Everything compounds. That truth appears again and again. Your habits compound. Your investments compound. Your skills compound. Your emotional patterns compound too. Even confidence compounds. Every time you face discomfort and survive it, your nervous system becomes stronger. That matters deeply when building income systems, because there will be uncertainty, moments where results feel slow, moments where doubt appears, moments where nobody understands your vision yet. Emotionally fragile people quit during those seasons. Emotionally grounded people continue, and continuation itself becomes an advantage. Most people stop too early. That is one of the greatest hidden opportunities in modern life. Simply continuing intelligently already separates you from the majority. Now let us talk about abundance, not fake positivity. Real abundance. Abundance is not pretended problems do not exist. Abundance is believing opportunities still exist despite problems. That difference matters. Scarcity says, there's never enough. It's too late. Other people already won. Abundance says, the world still rewards value. I can learn. I can improve. I can create. Those two mindsets produce completely different behavior patterns, and behavior patterns create completely different lives. That is why protecting your mental environment matters so much. What are you feeding your mind daily? Hopelessness, outrage, fear, or growth, learning, perspective? The human mind adapts to repeated input. If you consume negativity constantly, possibility shrinks. But if you consistently expose yourself to growth-oriented thinking, your internal world expands. That expansion matters because imagination drives action. A person who cannot imagine a different future rarely creates one. This is why vision matters emotionally, not fantasy vision. A clear sense of what you are building toward. Because difficult days become easier when attached to meaningful direction. And building income that never stops requires meaningful direction. You must know why you want freedom. Is it peace, time, family, health, creative independence, security? Money without purpose becomes emptiness. Purpose organizes wealth. That is why some people become rich yet remain restless. They built income, but forgot to build meaning. Do not make that mistake. Build both. Systems and soul, discipline and presence, ambition and health. Because success without inner peace becomes another prison. Now, as this chapter closes, there is one realization I want to leave deep in your mind. Your future changes the moment you stop treating money emotionally. and start treating it intentionally. Intentional people build slowly, calmly, strategically. And strategy beats emotional chaos every single time. In the next chapter, we are going to talk about the power of small, consistent investments, why ordinary people underestimate compounding completely, and how tiny, repeated decisions can eventually create freedom that once seemed impossible. Because the future is rarely changed by giant moments. More often, it is changed by small decisions repeated long enough to become unstoppable. We'd also like to remind you that we have a private members community on our channel. All members can vote on the topic of the next video, have priority in the comments section, and, most importantly, gain access to exclusive videos and lessons covering the most relevant topics and information specific to this month. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. Chapter 7. Small investments, massive freedom. Most people ignore small progress because they are hypnotized by large outcomes. That is why they remain stuck. They underestimate what repeated small actions can become over time. A tiny investment feels insignificant today. 1 hour of learning feels insignificant today. 1 page written feels insignificant today. 1 disciplined choice feels insignificant today. But life is not shaped by isolated moments. Life is shaped by accumulation, and accumulation is invisible in the beginning. That is why patience is emotionally difficult for modern people. We live in an age obsessed with immediate evidence. People want transformation they can post instantly, results they can display instantly, validation they can receive instantly. But compounding refuses to perform on command. Compounding rewards consistency quietly first, dramatically later. And that principle changes everything once you truly understand it. Imagine 2 people beginning at the exact same point. One spends every extra dollar chasing temporary pleasure. The other invests small amounts consistently into assets, skills, and systems. At first, there appears to be almost no difference between them. Months pass, then years. Suddenly, one person still feels trapped by every emergency, while the other begins experiencing breathing room. Not because of one giant event, because tiny, repeated decisions compounded. Compounding is almost magical emotionally because humans struggle to feel gradual change. That is why many people stop too early. They cannot yet see the future their habits are building, but the future is being built anyway, every day, whether intentionally or accidentally. Now think carefully about nature. A river does not carve stone through intensity. It carves stone through consistency. That is how lives change too. Not through occasional motivation, through repeated, aligned action. This is why financially intelligent people become deeply committed to routines. Not because routines are exciting, because routines create inevitability. A person consistently investing knowledge becomes wiser. A person consistently building skills becomes valuable. A person consistently creating assets becomes harder to control economically. The world changes dramatically for people who become difficult to replace, and replacement is one of the greatest fears inside traditional salary dependence. If one decision from someone above you can instantly destabilize your life, stress becomes permanent. That stress changes people. It makes them hesitant, overly compliant, afraid to rest, afraid to speak honestly, afraid to imagine alternatives. But systems slowly restore personal power, and small investments are one of the first steps toward that restoration. Now listen carefully. Investment is bigger than money. People hear the word investing and immediately think only about stocks or crypto or real estate. But the highest return investments often happen internally first. Investing in communication, investing in discipline, investing in emotional control, investing in health, investing in focus, because every external result eventually reflects internal capacity. A person with no focus cannot maintain systems. A person with no discipline cannot manage freedom. A person with no emotional regulation sabotages consistency. That is why self-development and financial growth are deeply connected. A stronger person creates a stronger life, and strengthening yourself happens through repeated small actions. That word again, repeated. Most people dramatically overestimate what they can do in 1 week and completely underestimate what they can do in 5 years. 5 years of consistent learning changes identity. 5 years of investing changes options. 5 years of disciplined creation changes entire family futures. But because humans struggle to emotionally value slow progress, many abandon the process before momentum arrives. That is tragic, because momentum eventually changes everything. At first, effort feels heavy. Then gradually systems become lighter, because habits automate behavior. That is why wealthy people often appear calmer, not because they avoid effort, because systems eventually reduce friction. Bills become less emotionally overwhelming. Unexpected problems become manageable instead of catastrophic. Time becomes more flexible. Decision-making becomes clearer. Calm itself becomes an asset. And emotional calm is one of the greatest luxuries in modern life. Now, think about the average person's financial behavior: earn, spend, recover, repeat. There is no system, only reaction. But builders interrupt that cycle intentionally. They create gaps between earning and spending. Those gaps become investments, and investments become future stability. This does not require perfection. That misconception stops people constantly. They think, I need a lot of money first. No, you need direction first. Small, consistent investments matter because they train identity before they transform finances. A person who learns consistency with small amounts becomes capable of managing larger opportunities later. Character expands before wealth expands sustainably. That is why lottery winners often collapse financially. Money arrived faster than identity evolved. Without discipline, income disappears. Without emotional maturity, opportunities disappear too. Real wealth grows slower because it builds foundations simultaneously. Now here is something deeply important. You must stop viewing saving and investing as deprivation. That mindset creates resistance. Think differently. You are purchasing future freedom. Every disciplined financial decision becomes a vote for your future self, a calmer future self, a freer future self, a less anxious future self. That perspective changes everything emotionally. Suddenly, discipline becomes meaningful instead of restrictive, and meaning sustains consistency. Now let us talk about the hidden power of ownership. Ownership changes psychology. When you own assets, even small ones, you begin thinking differently. Long-term instead of short-term. Strategically instead of emotionally. Ownership teaches patience because ownership benefits from time. That is why wealthy people often obsess over time itself. They understand something most people overlook completely. Time amplifies systems. Good systems become extraordinary given enough time. Bad habits become destructive given enough time. Time itself is neutral. Direction determines the outcome. And the earlier someone begins building intelligently, the greater the compounding advantage becomes. But starting late is still infinitely better than never starting. Do not waste emotional energy regretting timing. Regret consumes energy without creating progress. Start where you are. That sentence matters more than most people realize. Many individuals delay growth because they feel behind. They compare themselves to people already years ahead and become discouraged. But comparison ignores context completely. Everyone begins differently. Different resources, different environments, different fears, different opportunities. Your responsibility is not to become someone else overnight. Your responsibility is to begin moving consistently in the right direction. That alone changes everything over time. And over time, that phrase matters enormously because modern people think too short-term emotionally. One bad month feels like failure, one setback feels permanent. But builders zoom out mentally. They think in years, decades. That perspective creates emotional resilience. A temporary setback no longer destroys identity. It becomes feedback, and feedback improves systems. This is why emotionally mature people recover faster financially too. They adapt instead of collapsing. Adaptability is becoming one of the most valuable traits of this century. The world will continue changing rapidly. Technology will continue evolving. Industries will continue shifting. People who cling rigidly to old identities may struggle deeply, but learners remain flexible. Flexible people survive disruption better. That is why continuous learning itself is an investment strategy. Never stop adapting, never stop observing, never stop refining, because the future rewards people who remain teachable. Now imagine this for a moment. Imagine if every day for the next 5 years you did 3 things consistently. Learned something valuable, built something useful, invested something intentionally. Would your life remain the same? Impossible. Transformation would become unavoidable, not because of luck, because systems would eventually overpower circumstance. And that realization should give you hope. Real hope, not fantasy hope. Strategic hope, because your future is more changeable than your current routine wants you to believe. And the next chapter is where we begin discussing one of the greatest modern advantages available today: the ability to build digital assets. Assets that can continue generating value long after the original work is finished. And once you understand digital leverage, you will begin seeing the internet completely differently. Chapter 8. Digital Assets, the New Engines of Freedom. A factory used to require millions of dollars, buildings, machines, employees, land. Today, one focused person with disciplined internet access and a valuable idea can build a digital asset from a small room while the world sleeps. That is one of the greatest shifts in human history. And most people still do not fully understand what it means, because they still think like employees inside a world increasingly rewarding ownership. A digital asset is anything you create once that continues producing value repeatedly. A course, a book, a newsletter, a YouTube channel, a software tool, a digital template, an educational community, a design library, a membership platform, a podcast archive, a brand. The modern world allows information itself to become infrastructure. That changes the relationship between effort and income completely. Before the internet, your reach depended heavily on geography. Now your value can travel globally instantly. And this matters deeply because distribution used to belong almost entirely to gatekeepers, publishers, studios, networks, large corporations. Today, distribution belongs increasingly to creators who stay consistent long enough. That is why ordinary individuals are quietly building extraordinary freedom online. Not because they are famous, because they became useful repeatedly. Usefulness is the new leverage, and usefulness compounds digitally faster than most people realize. One helpful video today may still help people 5 years from now. One article written once can continue attracting readers for years. One digital product can continue selling while you sleep. This is why builders become obsessed with assets instead of temporary bursts of income. Temporary income disappears quickly. Assets continue working. And there is something psychologically powerful about waking up and realizing value was created while you rested. That moment changes people. Not because the money itself is magical, because it proves something deeper. Your future no longer depends entirely on your physical exhaustion. That realization restores hope. Now listen carefully. Digital assets are not easy money. That illusion damages people constantly. Most successful digital systems require years of patience before momentum arrives. Years, not days. And that is exactly why they remain powerful, because most people stop early. The internet created enormous opportunity, but it also created enormous distraction. People start building enthusiastically for 2 weeks, then disappear. 1 month later, they chase another idea. 3 months later, another trend. Scattered attention destroys compounding. The people who eventually build meaningful digital income are usually not the most talented initially. They are the people who continue. That word again. Continue. Continue learning. Continue refining. Continue publishing. Continue improving. Consistency is unfairly powerful in the digital world because most people remain inconsistent emotionally. They create only when inspired. But systems are built by people who create even when inspiration fades. Especially then. Now imagine someone uploading one useful educational video every week for 5 years. At first, almost nobody notices. The numbers feel discouraging. The growth feels slow. But eventually, the archive itself becomes an asset. Hundreds of pieces of value working simultaneously, that is leverage. The same applies to writing. One article means little. 200 articles become authority. One product means little. A refined ecosystem becomes stability. Most people underestimate accumulation because they focus emotionally on immediate results. But the internet rewards libraries. Libraries of value, libraries of trust, libraries of solutions. That is why creators who survive long enough often become unstoppable. Their body of work compounds. Now here is something important many people miss. You do not need to go viral. Virality is overrated emotionally. Sustainability matters more. A loyal audience of deeply engaged people is often more valuable than millions of distracted viewers. Trust creates opportunity, and trust grows slowly through consistency and honesty. That is why authenticity matters so much now. People are overwhelmed by performance. Everyone performing success, performing perfection, performing lifestyles, but audiences increasingly crave sincerity. Real stories, real lessons, real humanity. That is good news for ordinary people, because you do not need to pretend to be someone else to create value. You need clarity, patience, consistency, and courage. Because building publicly requires emotional resilience. Some people will judge you before results appear. That is inevitable. When someone sees you trying to build differently, it confronts their own fears. And fearful people often criticize what they secretly wish they had the courage to pursue. Do not let their limitations become your future. Now let us talk about one of the greatest opportunities of the modern era, the monetization of niche knowledge. The old economy rewarded broad mass appeal. The internet rewards specificity. You no longer need everyone. You need alignment. Someone teaching productivity systems for remote workers. Someone helping parents simplify healthy cooking. Someone explaining AI tools to beginners. Someone coaching communication for introverts. Specificity creates clarity, and clarity attracts the right people. That is why trying to appeal to everyone usually weakens impact. Depth matters more than breadth. Now think about this carefully. Every digital asset begins invisibly. No audience, no momentum, no certainty. That early stage is emotionally difficult because humans crave evidence, but evidence often arrives late. Faith must arrive earlier, not blind faith, strategic faith, the belief that repeated valuable action eventually compounds, because it does, and history proves this repeatedly. The creator ignored for years suddenly explodes publicly. The writer, rejected repeatedly, eventually changes lives globally. The entrepreneur, dismissed early, eventually builds systems others depend on. The public sees the breakthrough, rarely the years of obscurity beforehand. That is why emotional endurance matters so much. Can you continue building while unseen? That question separates consumers from creators. Consumers need stimulation. Creators tolerate silence. Consumers chase quick rewards. Creators trust long-term systems, and systems eventually become difficult to stop. Now let us address another misunderstanding. People think digital assets only benefit extroverts. Not true. In fact, many quiet people thrive digitally because the internet rewards clarity more than charisma over time. A thoughtful writer, a disciplined educator, a calm strategist. These people can build deeply impactful systems online without becoming loud personalities. Because value itself attracts attention eventually, and valuable people become economically resilient. That matters in uncertain times. The future belongs increasingly to adaptable creators. People capable of communicating, learning, solving problems, and building trust digitally. That does not mean everyone quits traditional careers. Again, this audiobook is not about recklessness. It is about reducing dependence gradually. Build while employed. Learn while stable. Create before escape. That path creates intelligent transition instead of emotional chaos. And intelligent transitions create lasting freedom. Now, imagine this scenario. Someone spends 2 hours every evening for 3 years building digital assets instead of endlessly consuming entertainment. 3 years. How different would their life become? The skill difference alone would be enormous. The confidence difference enormous. The opportunity difference enormous. That is why attention is so valuable. Attention invested wisely becomes assets. Attention wasted endlessly becomes regret. There are people right now spending their evenings building futures, and people spending their evenings escaping reality. 5 years from now, those decisions will become visible externally. That is compounding. Invisible first, obvious later. Now here is one of the deepest truths about building digital assets. The process transforms you before it rewards you. You become more disciplined, more patient, more adaptable, more emotionally resilient. Because creation forces growth, especially when nobody applauds initially. And that internal transformation may actually become more valuable than the money itself. Why? Because skills stay with you, mindset stays with you, discipline stays with you. A person who learns how to build value repeatedly becomes dangerous to limitation. Even if one system fails, they build another. That confidence changes life permanently. Fear decreases when capability increases, and capability grows through repetition. Now, as this chapter closes, remember this sentence carefully. The internet is either your greatest distraction or your greatest leverage. The choice is happening daily through your habits. And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about the hidden force behind every successful builder. Focus, not motivation, not talent. Focused attention, sustained long enough to create momentum most people never experience. Because scattered energy creates average lives. Focused energy creates transformation. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 9. Focus is the new wealth. The modern world is not starving for information. It is starving for focus. Everyone is connected. Everyone is informed. Everyone is stimulated. Yet very few people can sit alone with one meaningful task long enough to create something powerful. That is why focus has become a competitive advantage. Not talent, not luck. Sustained attention. And attention is under attack every minute. Notifications, short videos, breaking news, messages, endless scrolling, algorithms engineered to keep your brain reactive instead of reflective. People no longer lose hours accidentally. They lose entire futures gradually, one distracted evening at a time. Now think carefully about this. Every great system ever built required concentrated thought. Books, businesses, technology, art, movements, solutions. None of them were created through fragmented attention. Deep work creates meaningful results. Shallow distraction creates emotional exhaustion disguised as activity. That is one of the most important truths of this generation. Many people feel busy constantly, yet remain unchanged for years, because movement is not always progress. A person can consume productivity content all day and still avoid the one task that could actually transform their future. Why? Because focus is emotionally uncomfortable. When you sit quietly with meaningful work, your mind confronts resistance. Doubt appears, boredom appears, restlessness appears, and most people immediately escape that discomfort through stimulation. Check the phone, open another tab, watch another video. Tiny interruptions, but tiny interruptions destroy momentum. Momentum requires immersion. That is why builders protect their attention aggressively, not because they dislike entertainment, because they understand attention is life force. Whatever consistently receives your attention eventually shapes your identity. If your attention belongs entirely to distraction, your future slowly dissolves into reaction. But if your attention belongs to creation, your future begins expanding. That difference becomes enormous over time. Now, let us talk honestly about dopamine. Modern platforms are designed to keep you emotionally hooked. Quick stimulation, quick novelty, quick emotional shifts. The brain becomes conditioned to constant reward, and once that conditioning becomes extreme, ordinary focused work feels boring. This is dangerous, because the activities that create meaningful freedom often feel quiet. Initially, studying feels slower than scrolling. Building feels slower than consuming. Practicing feels slower than entertainment. But slow actions often create fast transformation later, and fast stimulation often creates slow destruction later. That is the trade most people never notice until years pass. There are individuals right now consuming 6 or 7 hours of content daily while telling themselves they don't have time to build. Not because they are lazy, because their attention has been fragmented so deeply they struggle to sustain concentration long enough for meaningful progress. That is why reclaiming focus feels almost spiritual now. A focused person becomes powerful quickly, not because focus magically creates success, because focus creates depth, and depth creates value. Imagine someone practicing a skill deeply for 2 focused hours every day for 5 years. How rare would that become in a distracted world? Extremely rare. And rarity creates opportunity. Most people never reach exceptional levels because they never remain concentrated long enough. They restart constantly. New app, new plan, new distraction, new shortcut. Meanwhile, focused people compound quietly. That word again, quietly. The world often misunderstands focused individuals in the beginning. People may call them obsessed, too serious, too disciplined. But eventually, the results speak. Because focused attention creates output that distracted people struggle to replicate. And output changes reality. Now here is something important. Focus is not just about productivity. It is about peace. A scattered mind feels emotionally exhausted because it never fully lands anywhere, always switching, always reacting, always stimulated. But when someone enters deep, focused work, something strange happens. The noise fades, the mind sharpens, time changes, presence returns. That state is deeply healing. Humans were not designed for constant fragmentation. That is why so many people feel mentally tired despite doing very little meaningful creation. Mental switching drains energy. And corporations understand this. Why? Because distracted people consume more and question less. Focused people build independence. That matters. Now think about some of the most powerful creators, entrepreneurs, writers, inventors, and thinkers throughout history. Almost all protected solitude intentionally. Not because they hated people, because clarity requires space. Space to think, space to reflect, space to create. But modern people fear silence. Silence forces confrontation with unfinished thoughts, unresolved fears, unbuilt dreams, avoided truths. So they stay stimulated constantly. Music, video, scrolling, noise, anything to avoid sitting quietly with themselves. But transformation often begins in silence. That moment, late at night, when you realize your current life no longer fits your potential. That quiet morning when you decide distractions have stolen enough from you already. That internal shift matters more than external motivation ever will. Because once someone truly values focus, their life changes rapidly. They stop leaking energy everywhere. And energy leaks are expensive. Think about how many dreams die from divided attention. Books never finished. Businesses never launched. Skills never mastered. Ideas never explored. Not because people lacked ability, because they lacked sustained focus. And sustained focus requires boundaries. You cannot build meaningful systems while constantly available to noise. At some point, you must choose endless consumption or intentional creation. Both cannot dominate your life simultaneously. Now listen carefully. This does not mean becoming extreme or joyless. Balance matters. Rest matters. Connection matters. Presence matters. But unconscious distraction is not rest. It is escape. Real rest restores energy. Mindless distraction often drains it further. That is why many people finish hours of scrolling feeling strangely empty afterward. Because consumption without intention rarely nourishes the soul. Creation does. Learning does. Growth does. Progress does. Humans are wired for meaningful contribution. That is why purposeful work energizes people differently than passive entertainment. Now imagine if you reclaimed just 2 focused hours every day. No distractions, no notifications, no multitasking. 2 hours dedicated entirely to building skills, systems, or assets. What would happen over 1 year, over 3 years? The transformation would become undeniable, not because 2 hours sounds dramatic, because consistency multiplied by focus becomes almost unstoppable. This is why highly successful people often seem ahead, not necessarily smarter, more focused for longer periods. That is the hidden advantage. And here is another truth nobody says enough. Your environment either strengthens focus or destroys it. A cluttered environment weakens clarity. A chaotic social circle weakens discipline. Constant negativity weakens momentum. Protecting your environment is protecting your future. That includes digital environments too. Who are you following? What are you consuming? What emotions dominate your feed daily? Because emotional atmosphere shapes mental direction, and mental direction shapes destiny. That is why intentional creators become selective. Selective with time, selective with energy, selective with attention, not arrogantly, strategically, because every yes costs something internally. Now let us connect this directly to income that never stops. Every meaningful asset requires concentrated effort before it compounds. A distracted person struggles to build systems because systems require depth. Writing requires focus. Coding requires focus. Designing requires focus. Strategic thinking requires focus. Attention itself becomes capital. And people who learn to direct their attention intentionally gain an advantage that grows every year, especially in an age where distraction is normalized. Now here is the deeper lesson underneath all of this. The quality of your life is shaped by the quality of your attention. What you repeatedly notice grows stronger emotionally. Notice problems constantly, and life feels heavy. Notice possibilities consistently, and life feels expandable. Focus shapes perception itself, and perception influences action. That is why hopeful, focused people often create opportunities hopeless, distracted people never even see. Same world, different attention, different outcome. And as this chapter closes, I want you to remember one sentence deeply. Where your attention goes, your future follows. That decision changes everything. Now listen carefully, because this is the final message I want to leave in your mind tonight. A salary can pay your bills, but discipline can change your identity. Focus can change your future. Systems can change your freedom. And self-mastery can change your entire life. Never forget that. If this audiobook spoke to something deep inside you, do not let it become temporary emotion. Let it become direction. Write down the line that hit you hardest. Share this audiobook with someone who feels trapped in survival mode. And in the comments, declare one system you are beginning to build starting today. Not someday, today. Because the future belongs to people who build intentionally, while others drift unconsciously. And if you stay on this path, quietly, patiently, consistently, one day you will wake up and realize something extraordinary. You are no longer surviving your life. You are finally living it.